There's one thing I thought of that I don't think I mentioned last time, but it was about um uh that according to a certain opinion, there is a pasuk to include miscarried fetuses that they're gonna have tchias mason. So even though they never were born, there could still be tchias mason. So I'm trying to point out halachically the cutoff is 40 days. If it's a miscarriage before it's 40 days, it's doesn't even have the status of a fetus. It has certain halachas in regard to if she'd be a nida versus being a yoledes, the tuma of a woman who gives birth. If it's a fetus, then it would have statuses of a yoledes, even though she didn't give birth to a live baby. Whereas if it was before 40 days, it wouldn't be. Another, yeah, 40 days from conception. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in medicine, they would call something like that, I think, a chemical pregnancy. Now, I don't know exactly when they cut it, when the cutoff is, but so, so something that could come up from the, so even, so why could, so I don't think I mentioned this, but I want to mention it now. So I was thinking about it. Why would someone that was never born have Chias Amesim, this fetus? So one thing that would depend on is the question is when does the neshama enter that body? So I think Moshe Feinstein mentions in regard to halachas of abortion that abortion would be usher. Let's say if you say the neshama comes in 40 days, then you couldn't be able to do an abortion after 40 days. If it comes at 7 months or whatever, when the fetus is considered viable halachically, then that some I think might say that I don't know if the what's his name, the Tzitz Eliezer has this opinion or not. Some might say during the birth process or once the head comes out, then it would get the neshama. But you could possibly say that that depends on that the abortion child depends on when it gets a neshama, and then you could say that that would also this Gemara when a fetus would have tchias mason would depend on if it was a stage where it reached the where it had the neshama, then it would have tchias mason. But before it wouldn't. I don't know. We don't know these things, but these are things that we could mention in Torah that we could learn about that what the Gemara mentions. We don't know. There's different opinions. It's a big machlokas, but and we don't really know. That's a slightly different reason. Because you could say that it doesn't have to do with the neshama, but according to Jews, Elokai neshama shenasat to be tahorahi. The baby when it's born is innocent. According to the Christians, there's original sin. The baby who's born is already a rasha. So that could be it doesn't necessarily have to be with the regard to it. So that yeah, I was going to mention that also. So good point. Another Gemara we mentioned, Rabbi Lazar, who Rabbi Yochanan was very upset at, said that only Talmidei Chachamim will have Tchias Amesim, and not Amaratim. Yeah. So a fetus, how is a fetus a Talmid Chacham? Why would it have to kill according to Rabbi Lazar? So you could say that Gemara argues on Rabbi Lazar, or you could say something else, and that's what Marty was mentioning. Disagreed with that right away. Right, Rabbi Yochanan was very upset with him saying that. No, only someone who's over to Zara wouldn't, but don't make the Amaratim think they're not going to have to Tchias Amesim. So the other shot we could say is like Marty mentioned the Medrash that the baby is learning has a malach who's teaching him Torah. So because the fetus is learning Torah, it's not an Amaretz. So there could be Tchias Amesim. So that was the other point I wanted to mention. Good thinking, Marty. Okay. So I think we left off. Well, we'll just go from the middle of the first column on 111b5. So we were talking about there's that regular trees, and after Mashiach comes, regular trees. Yeah, so we mentioned about some things about Yisachar or whatever that they're going to tie their donkey next to a vine. So we're saying that vines are going to have so much wine. You're going to need two donkeys to load it, or even regular trees are going to give grapes that are going to have really, really good wine. So, Pashta Dukreba Maiksiv. What's the simple, plain shot of the pasuk about Chachlili miyayin, Chachlili einai miyayin, or Leven Shinai mechalav? So your smile is better for me than wine. Uleven Shinayim, something ben shinayim, which with the drush we had was ben shanim, that it was an old, but mechalav is better than wine. But what is it, the pshat of the pasuk? Kias Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he gave the following explanation. Amar Knesset Yisrael Kadosh Baruch Hu. Knesset Yisrael said to Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam, Ramos Meinecha Debas Mechamra, Master of the universe, hint to us with your eyes that you enjoy us more than fine wine. Ba'achvile Shina Debas Mechalva, and show me your teeth, which means smile, which are better than milk. So that it's talking about the Knesset Yisrael wanting to know from Hashem that we're making him happy. Misayela Rabbi Yochanan, and this pshat fits in well with the statement that Rabbi Yochanan said. Da'am Rabbi Yochanan, Tov Hamal ben Shinaim L'Chavero, Yosem Mimashkeu Chalav. Someone who whitens his teeth to a friend. If you give someone a smile, it's better than giving him milk to drink. Shnemer Uleven Shinaim Chalav. And so Leben Shinayim could be a son of teeth, Mechalav, but Al Tikre Leven Shinayim, don't say the one who has teeth, or Leven Shinayim, whatever that means, Ela Libun Shinayim, the white of your teeth. So showing the white of your teeth, so we know in Pirkei Avos, greet someone B'Sever Panim Yafos, greet someone with a shining countenance. That's similar to what Rabbi Yochanan is saying here. To greet someone who is showing them the whites of your teeth is a very important thing. It's better than even giving him a drink of wine, of milk. And it's a separate halacha, let's say, in regard to Hilchos Tzedakah. I think the Rambam mentions Hilchos Matnos Aniyim, that you could fulfill Tzedakah even if you don't have any money to give him, but if you speak nicely and give the person reassurance, you fulfill the mitzvah of Tzedakah even without any money. So that's probably a similar, it's slightly different because the laws of Tzedakah are laws of Tzedakah, but this Loven Shinayim, the Libun Shinayim, the white of your teeth. And actually, in Arabic, their yogurt Leban is white. The chocolate one, the Jews made chocolate Leban, but Leban is from the same root. We have Lavan, they have Leban. Rabbi Chia bar Adi Makri Dardiki Reish Lakish Hava. Rabbi Chia bar Ada was the Malamed. He was the teacher of the children of Reish Lakish. Ifgar Tlasiyomi Veloasa. He was missing for 3 days and didn't come. What does it mean that he was missing and he didn't come? If he was missing, he didn't come. If he didn't come, he was missing. What's going on? Kiyasa, when he came, Amarle Amai Ifgart. Reish Lakish says, why weren't you here? Amarle, Rabbi Abba says, so this is a continuation of the Gemara about how prolific the fruits of Eretz Yisrael are. Amarlo Dalas Achas Hiniach Liaba. My father left me one vine. Uvatarti Mimenu Yom Rishon. I harvested the grapes from it for 1 day. 300 clusters, and each cluster made a garav of wine, a certain good quality. Yom Sheni Batarti Mimenu 300 eshkolos. The second day I harvested another 300 eshkolos. Shtei eshkolos a garav, and every 2 clusters made a sa of wine. So even though he had 300 clusters, the yield of wine was only 50% of what it was the first day. Yom Shlishi Batarti 300 eshkolos, 3 eshkolos a garav. On the third day, I also picked 300 clusters, but I got a garav after only 3 clusters. And at the end, I made hefker, more than half of the remaining crop of this vine, because there's so much there. So Amarle, Reish Lakish said, "Ilav difgar to have avda tfei." If you wouldn't have skipped teaching, you would have had even more. So Reish Lakish says, because it was diminishing returns. Each day that he missed teaching, it was getting significantly less yield of wine from the grapes that he harvested. So Reish Lakish says it's an avera. It's a punishment for you skipping teaching. Teaching kids Torah is so important. Even on Tisha B'av, we teach the kids. Not that there's been Zmanim nowadays, but Rami bar Yecheskel ikol Bnei Brak. Rami bar Yecheskel went to Bnei Brak. Chazanhu lahani ize te ka'achlan tuse te ene. He saw that these goats were eating under the fig trees. v'katanev dufsha mite'ene, and honey was flowing, dripping out of the figs. Ume'arev bahadi hadad v'chal v'tayif minayu, and milk was dripping from the udders of the female goats over here. Uma'ari bahadi adadi, and so the milk and the honey were mixing together. Amar, he said, Hainu zavas chalav udvash. I see a kiyum of the pasuk that Eretz Yisrael is a land flowing with milk and honey. The milk from these goats were eating from the figs of Eretz Yisrael that are dripping with honey. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Dustoi. Milod laono shosha milin. So the distance between load and ono is 3 mil. Pamachas kidanti b'nashef. Once I went very fast. I left very early in the morning. V'halachti ad kersule bidvash ad shel te'ena. And I walked up to my ankles in fig honey. So I guess there were a lot of fig trees around there, and he was saying that they were so big, juicy figs, they were dripping with honey. Lahavdil, I was at the fruit market yesterday, and they had in the shrink wrap things fresh figs. They were hard, didn't look like that you'd get much out of them. Actually, no, they were dates. Never mind. Sometimes you have the fresh of, I don't know. We learned in Shemitah, and when we learned Shvius, that certain things they don't ripen unless you put a hole in them, and this and that. So I don't know. I don't want to try eating the raw figs and dates because I don't know they're supposed to be. I might eat them wrong.
Yeah, I'm worried about figs too.
Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, "L'didi chazili zavas chalav v'dvash tzipori." I saw tzipori flowing with milk and honey. V'havi shitzar milin ashitzar milin. It was 16 mil by 16 mil. So Rashi says that somewhere between 87 and 133 square miles, based on how much an amma is. So meaning it was so. Rabbi Yaakov saw a distance of 3 mil that he was walking with his ankle, with flowing with milk and honey. Reish Lakish said near Tzipori he saw a big, or almost 100, or a little give or take 100 miles, square miles, flowing with milk and honey, which I don't know. 100 miles around Tzipori is a big chunk of Eretz Yisrael and Syria also. So he must be hinting to something. It's hard for me to understand that this is literal. Square miles. It's 17. It's a lot of land. Am Rabba Bar Chana Ledidi Chazili Zavas Chalavacha Kol Eretz Yisrael, and Rabba Bar Chana says, I saw the Zavas Chalavacha of the entire Eretz Yisrael as we turn to Kufya Beis Amud Aleph. The Havya can be Bei Michse at Akra de Tulbanki. It's like you would be from the place called Bei Michse until the bridge of Tul Bakni. Asim de Tartin Parse Uchra Uposia Shisa Parse. 22 parsos by 6 parsos. So according to this, Archibald says it's between 720 and about 1,100 square miles. Rab Chaba of Rav Avira of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina iklu lahu asra. Rab Chaba, Rabbi Avira, and Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina went to a certain land. Aitu kameo afarsika, they brought a peach. Tahavi keilfus kvarhina. It was the size of a frying pan of kvarhina. The ilfus kvarhino hani kamahavi, and how big was a frying pan in Kfarhino? Chamesh sa'in, 5 sa'in. So the article says it's between a little bit more than 11 to 22 and a half gallons. So obviously this was talking about somewhere in Eretz Yisrael where they had such a good peach. Lahavdil, James and the giant peach, right? So it was the Jewish version is Reb Chaba, Reb Avir, and Reb Yossi bar Chanina's giant peach. Achlu shlish, they ate a third of this peach. V'ifkiru shlish, they made a third of it hefker. V'nasnu lifnei behentan shlish, and they gave a third of it for their animal to eat, for the animals to eat. L'shana iklil Rebbe Lazar l'hasam. A year later, Rebbe Lazar went there. V'atzul kamei. They brought the peach in front of him, but nakat biyadeh. He took it in one hand. It was so much smaller. V'amar eretz pli lemlecha meiras yoshvei. A land that gives a lot of good fruit comes to a salted place that doesn't produce much from the evil of those who live in it. So makes it sound like they do averos, and the land doesn't produce so much anymore. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi ikla legavla. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi went to Gavla. Chazan hu lahan hu kitufe dahavi kame ki igli. He saw that the clusters of grapes they looked like little calves, like little cows, young calves, agala. So Amar Agla ben Akfanim. So he said to someone over there, "Look, there's a calf in the grapevine over there." Amar le kitufenin. No, those are just the clusters of grapes. Amar Eretz Eretz Hachnisi Perasaya. Land, land, bring your fruits. Lemiat Motzia Perasaya. Who are you producing the fruits for? La Ravim Halal Shamdo Len B'Chatosenu. To these Arabs that are over us due to our averos. Lashana Ikle Reb Chia Lahasam. The next year, Reb Chia went to that place. Chazenu Tavikameki easy. He saw that they look like goats. A little goat is smaller than a calf. Amr Izan ben Akfanim. He said, "There's goats over there." Amrulay, they said to him, "Zil lo tavid lekechavrach." Go, don't do to us what your colleague did. Meaning he spoke against it, and so the land is producing less. So we don't want you to curse us more that the land is going to produce even less next year. There's a medrash, I think it's in this week's parsha. We're Re'eh this week. So Aser to Aser. There's a medrash, give Meiser in order that you will become rich. Asher, it means rich. And Meiser is from the word Eser, a tenth. So there was a certain guy who his father always gave up Trumas to Maestros, was a good field. And then he decided, why do the Kohanim and Levium get what I got? He stopped giving Trumas to Maestros, and a few years later, the field only gave a tenth of what it used to produce. So then his family came out dressed in special clothes, and they said, Mazel Tov, you're a Kohen now. He said, what do you mean? The field used to get, 1,000 bushels, and the Kohen got 100. Now the field is giving you 100. You must be a Kohen. But it was so it wasn't a good thing. Tan Rabbanon, we learned in the Brayso, when we had good bracha in Eretz Yisrael, Beisa Osen Chameshus Ribo Korin. A Beisa, which is I think 2,500 square amos. Yeah, 2,500 square amos. So it doesn't say here, but it would be, let's see here. It doesn't give us square footage here, but so it would be between about 6,000 and 9,000 square feet. And it would, so that size field would make 50 10,000s. So 500,000, excuse me. Oh, chameshas, not chavi. 5 10,000. So 50,000 sa'ah of produce. So Rashi, so Art Scroll points out that that's a ratio of one seed, one sub seed to 50,000 core produce is 1 to 1.5 million. That's the ratio of how much it produced from the amount of seeds. Yeshivasa shel Tzoan, and when Tzoan, which was a very good land, Besa Osin Shivim Koren. One Besa would make only 70 core, and Eretz Yisrael made 50,000 versus 70. A lot more. Titania, because we learned in another brisa. Amr Meir, Nira Isi Bevikas Beishaan. I saw in the valley of Beishaan. Now nowadays, Beishaan, it's near Tiberia. It's like 100, gets 120 degrees during the summer. I was at the Tachanemer Kazit there, but I didn't really make it there. Kibbutz Tirat Tzvi is in that area.
Yeah, the hottest place.
It's not pleasant. What? It was a religious kibbutz. It is, yeah. So a friend of my father, actually his father has a yahrzeit plaque here. When he went around the Yom Kippur War, there were big arguments there because of should they take reparation money from Germany, and they were gonna, I think, or get, I don't know if it was money or get ovens. And a lot of people said our parents and our siblings were burned up in German ovens. We don't want German ovens, this and that. But 25 years ago, they were making air conditioners. I don't know if they still make air conditioners there. They also have turkey. We can get cold cuts here from Tirat Tzvi. They sell it here. And in Israel, they sell a Mahadran, Shchita, turkey, and not Mahadran. They have two levels that they sell. And at a certain time, I'm not sure. I don't know that it was there. But there were places, because there's a law in Israel, you're not allowed to raise pigs. I mean, there's halacha you can't, but then they also made laws in Israel you can't. So they put wood down and they said, "Oh, we're not raising pigs in Israel." I'm not saying it happened at Tirat Tzvi. I'm not saying that it was there, but there were places. So they tried to get around the law by doing that. But yeah, so that's in Beit Sha'an. Beisa Osin Shivim Koren. I saw that one Beisa made 70 kor. Now, according to this, in those days, it seems that the Ole Bavel certainly didn't live in Beit Sha'an, so it wasn't part of Eretz Yisrael. And there was no land better than Mitzrayim. Shanamar, as the pasuk says, "Higan Hashem keretz Mitzrayim." This is a pasuk in Lech Lecha, like the garden of Hashem in Eretz Mitzrayim. Ve'en lechem ula b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim yoser mitzoan. And so Eretz Yisrael was I mean, excuse me, Mitzrayim was more fertile than any other land. And within Mitzrayim, Tzoan was the most fertile part of Mitzrayim. The Havum Rabbi ve'Melachim, because that's where the kings all lived, because it was such a great place. His officers were in Tzoan. There's no rocky bad land in Eretz Yisrael than Chevron. The Havu Kavri Be'Shikvi. How do we know it was bad land? That's where they buried people. You're not going to want to, unless you were Stalin, you weren't going to give up prime real estate for cemetery. But Chevron was 7 times more fertile than Tzoan. But the Chevron so it says Chevron was built 7 years before Tzoan was built in Mitzrayim. So my nivnasa, what does it mean built? If you say literally built, it doesn't make sense. After Adam Bona live no katan, live no gadol. Because you wouldn't build a city for your younger son before you build one for your older sons. Eksiv, Shanemar, as the pasuk says, it's turned to 112a6 in Parshas Noach. Excuse me, 112a2. Uvnei Cham, the sons of Cham. This is after the Mabul. Kush umitraim ufud uchnan. Kush was one son. Mitraim, Pud, and Chnan. And Canaan built these other cities. Excuse me, Cham built Canaan and he built Mitzrayim. So he wouldn't have built a Chevron in Canaan before he built Tzoan in Mitzrayim for his youngest son. So it doesn't mean Sheva Shanim 7 years, but it's 7 times more productive than Tzoan. So 70. So if in Tzoan they can make 70 kor, 70 times 7 is 490. And that's because Chevron is a rocky place. But if it wasn't rocky, you can make 500 kor. So we said that Eretz Yisrael was going to make produce 50,000 kor per besa. So we're up to 500. And that's if there's no special bracha to Eretz Yisrael. Yitzchak planted in that, he seeded the field, and Mea Sha'arim came. 100-fold got, so 500 times 100 is 500,000. So that's how we get that one base Sa'ah will yield 50,000 korim, which is approximately a bushel type measure of produce. Tanya, we learned in the Brayso. I'm Rabbi Yossi. Sabi Yehuda Haisa Osa Chamesh Sayin. One saw in Yehuda would make 5 sayin of produce. Saw Kamach. So what are the 5 saw? One saw was regular flour. Saw Solas. One was fine flour. Saw Subin. One saw was bran. Saw Morsin. One was even coarser bran. Usa Kiburaya. And one was Kiburayu, which was the lowest quality. So I mean, it's a little bit strange the order that it. Well, I think Kiburayo is the worst quality, but I'm not sure about this actually. So Kamach is regular flour. Solus is better. Subin is bran. That's definitely lower quality. I think you normally would feed bran to your animals, and Morsin is even lower quality. And Kiburaya, Rashi says you make it's not a good bread, but it is bread. So the order is just random, it seems. It's not giving an order from best to worst or from worst to best. Amar Luhat Tzeduki Rabbi Yochanan, a certain Tzeduki. So Tzedukim were people who rejected the Torah Shabbat Pen. They only took the Torah literally. Ya mashbichin ba'arachim. It's good that you praise your land. Beisa achas liaba. My father left me his inheritance one Besa, 2,500 square amos. Mimeno meshach, I have from that I have oil. Mimeno chamar, I have wine. Mimeno ibor, I have grain. Mimeno kitnius, I have legumes and beans. Mimeno roas miknasi, and from that land I'm able to graze my livestock. So it's a very fertile, and not just fertile, but it's diverse. Now nowadays in their chevron they grow a lot of grapes, but I don't know if that's historically was also or not. I mean, I think they had olives around there because by the Gush they have an ancient olive pit, a pit for where they used to make oil. So I don't think that was the same thing as wine, but I think they think it's from the time around the time of the Avos. I don't remember exactly. But.
Well, again, scenario, use in there, so buy and try to plant this, olive and grape, and then somebody comes in up for so.
Right. I don't know if I mean, from the words here, they seem to also plant regular crops. Well, I don't know if they do that around there anymore. I don't know. A certain person from an Amori person said to someone from Eretz Yisrael, Hahu Talsa de Kaima Aguda di Ardena, the date palm that's on the Jordan River, Kama Gadrisumina. How much did you harvest from it? Amarlu Shisin Kori, 60 kor. Amarle, he said to him, Akatilo Aylo Suba. Achrivu, you haven't even entered Eretz Yisrael and you already destroyed it. Anan may have Esrin Kori have a Gazrina me now. I got 120 core from you, and so you only got half as much as I have. Amarle, so the person from Eretz Yisrael said, Ananami Chad Megisa Kaminalach. I only meant 60 from this side of the tree. So according to that, it depends. If there's two sides, then you get as much. So he's not saying that Eretz Yisrael is any better, but he's saying it's not worse. So Rashi points out that this had to be at the time of coming to Eretz Yisrael. It's not talking about the time of the Gemara. It's talking about when the Amori were going to be driven out from Eretz Canaan. Amrav Chista, Eretz Chemda, Nachlas Tzvi. I'm going to give you an Eretz Chemda, the inheritance of Tzvi. Tzvi could mean dare. Lama Eretz Yisrael Nimshal Tzvi, or Lama Eretz Yisrael Nimshal Tzvi. Why is Eretz Yisrael compared to a deer? Lo Amar to tell you, Matzvi Zeh She'ein Oro Machzik Besaro. This deer, its skin is barely able to hold all the flesh that's inside of it. So Rashi says that after you would skin it, I guess the hide contracts, so you can't fit the meat in it anymore. Which I don't know what the chiddush that is. I don't know if it. I guess it's there. I guess they're saying that dairy is different than other things. Is a Gemara at the beginning of Brachos? Ein achor malia mechuliasa. If you dig a hole, you won't be able to fill in the hole with the dirt that you just dug out of it. So I don't know if it's a similar type thing. So just like this deer, it's once you skin it, this you can't put the meat back inside of it. It's the meat is too big to be contained by it. After Tishral in Machzekes Peroseh, Eretz Yisrael can't contain its fruit because it's so much. Davar Acher, another pshat is Matzvi Zakam B'Kol Achayos. Just like a deer is the fastest of all the animals. After Eretz Yisrael Kam B'Kol Ratzos Vashos Peroseh, Eretz Yisrael is the fastest of all the lands for its fruit to ripen. Now, there is a Gemara in Kedushin, I think, in the second half of the first parak. It might not be in Kedushin, but trying to talk about how fast the fruit ripened when Bnei Israel entered Eretz Yisrael, because they entered Pesach time. The problem is that whatever, a very strange Gemara that basically the fruit had like 5 days to ripen, and they had to bring the korban how long the mun lasted, because they couldn't eat from the Paris of Eretz Yisrael until they brought the korban omer, but it needed to grow while they were there already. It's unusual Gemara, but also a different Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Yod Aleph about by the sugya of Iber Hashana about making a leap year mentions from Elisha. We read it in Haftorah sometime. Ishba Mibal Shleisha, and we're saying that that was the fastest place within the different regions of Eretz Yisrael. The place ripened the fastest, and this was the place where it ripened the earliest. And I think it was saying that it wasn't yet ripe, so they had to add another month. I think that's what the Gemara is saying over there. I don't remember. I haven't looked it up. I didn't look it up for this. I didn't think of it until just now. Uh, just like a deer is the fastest animal, after the no land ripens its peros as fast as Eretz Yisrael. So it's good that a tzvi is very fast, but it's not the fattiest, tastiest meat. After Eretz Yisrael, but maybe Eretz Yisrael it might ripen. The produce might ripen quickly, but it's not the fattest, juiciest, biggest crop. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "Zavas chalav udvash shmeina mechalav msukim devash." It says flowing with milk and honey. Don't say literally milk and honey, but they're fatter than milk and sweeter than honey. Okay, now milk. Nowadays we have skim and 1% and 2% and whole, but before we had the homogenation machines, milk. My father told me when he was younger, they had the glass bottles. It wasn't so the cream would always come to the top. So the milk had all the different levels of fatness and yumminess in it. Rabbi Lazar bar Kiva Sak L'Eretz Yisrael Amar. When Rabbi Lazar was going to Eretz Yisrael, he said, "Palti le'mechada." I've been saved from one of the curses in Chumash. So what are the curses? We're going to talk about it, I think. Ki samchu, when he received smicha, Amar Palti lemitarti. I've been saved from two curses. Ki osvu besoda ibor Amar Palti lemitlas. When he got taught, well, either when he was taught or when he became one of the people that would decide when Rashi says that the soda Eber was such as when to add an extra month of Adar. But I think from a Gemara in Shabbos, soda Eber is also to know when exactly Rosh Chodesh is. The molad that we have is an average time. But Chazal definitely knew a more exact time, but they didn't teach that to everyone. You had to be special to be taught that. So when he either got taught that or they sat him down in the Soda Iber The article translates it as the committee that would decide these things, but it makes it sound like Ibra Shana. I think it includes Rosh Chodesh. He said he was saved from 3 curses. So what are the 3 curses from Yechaskel? Shenemar v'haitzali yadi el revim achozim shav. My hand will be, meaning a punishment to the prophets that prophesize falsely. They won't be in. So the pasuk says, "Kosm kazav," and the sorcerer who gives false. Besod ami lo yeh. He won't be in the. So that the Gemara doesn't say. But here's the rest of the pasuk. In the secret of my nation, they won't be. So we're saying that's talking about Soda Ibra, the secret calculation formula to know when the Rosh Chodesh is going to be. Uviksav Beis Yisrael kasevu, in the writing of Beis Yisrael they won't be written. So he had a smicha. Now someone mentioned, Archko mentions it from the Maram Shif that when they had real smicha they would lean. But when that got stopped, they would write a smicha, and that's why smicha is considered ksav, something written. Ve'al admas Yisrael yavo, and to the land of Yisrael you won't come. So when he reached Eretz Yisrael, that curse he knew didn't apply to him anymore. V'yadat yeni Hashem Elokim. Oh, so the Gemara mentions it. V'soda milo yiyu zesoda iber. Ubiksav Beis Yisrael kasevu zesmicha. Ve'al admas Yisrael yavo kamashmo. Now, there is a mission in the end of, I think it's in the last parak of Kedushin, that there was a certain, I think we mentioned it back in the second parak when we spoke about that Basin would verify the signatures on the Kiyum Shtaros, that the people signed on the. So there was a Kohen Shel Tzipori. There was some, I think it was in Tzipori, they had a certain courthouse where they had records who was kosher, who was an aide, who was a dayan. It could be also, instead of the ksav smicha that the article brings from Maram Shif, it might be that people who had reached a level of psak like that were written down. It's possible. I have to look at the Gemara again to see if that's true, but maybe that's a shot. Okay, so Ramban mentions the following Gemara, famous Gemara. Reb Zera kiavos hok Eretz Yisrael. When Reb Zera reached Eretz Yisrael, lo ashkach mibar le'ma'abar, he couldn't find a bridge to cross. Nakat b'metzra v'ka'avar. So there was a narrow bridge that it was like either a plank or a rope. Probably was a narrow plank, but because it was so narrow, they also had a rope a little bit higher than that. So you'd hang on to the rope with your hands and move, I guess, sideways across. So nakat b'metzra v'ka'avar. So he went on this narrow thing and crossed in order to get across to Eretz Yisrael. Amalu Atsuduki, a certain Saduki said, Ama Pazina, impetuous people, the Kadmisa, Pumaicha, Udnaichu, you put your mouth before your ears, Akati, Befzizuzaichu, Kamaisu, you still act so with impetuousness. Why didn't you wait? So whether it was for a boat or to go to a place where there was a bigger bridge, Amarle, Dukta de Moshe Aaron Lozachaba, Anami Yemer de Zachinova. A place that Moshe and Aaron didn't merit to get, how would I know that I'm going to merit? So I have to take the initiative and get there as fast as I can. Rav Abba Menashe Kifi da Akko. Rav Abba kissed the stones of Akko. When he got there, he kissed it because that's when he entered Eretz Yisrael. So he kissed the ground. Rab Chanina Misak, and I believe the Ramban mentions to prove that there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael at all time, because if there wasn't a mitzvah, what was so special? As soon as he reached Eretz Yisrael, he kissed the ground. Rab Chanina Misakin Maskale. Rab Chia tried to smooth the roads in Eretz Yisrael to make to smooth it out. If it was a hole, he would fill it up. If it was a little bump, he would flatten it out. I was just reading because Beryl Wine, the son of Rabbi Beryl Wine, the son of Rabbi Zev Wine, here passed away, I think on Shabbos or whatever. So I was reading from one of his books that he had, and many members of his family moved to Eretz Yisrael even before there was an Eretz Yisrael, and his father learned by Rav Kook. And one of his uncles, he said, I don't remember if it was Talvi, but he was literally laid the bricks of the street to make the street. but one was in Rehovot, one was they weren't in big cities even. Rav Ami, Rav Asi, as we get to the very last Amud here, 112b, Kufya Beis Amud Beis, Kaimu Mishimsha Latula Mitula Lashimsha. They would move from the sun to the shade, and from the so meaning if they were learning and the sun came, they moved to the shady part in the summertime, and they would move from the shade to the sun when it's winter, because so when it was hot, they would move into the shade, and when it was cold, they would move from the shade into the sun, so that they wouldn't complain about Eretz Yisrael. So I guess instead of them saying that, oh, it's hot in here and be a complaint about the heat of Eretz Yisrael, they moved in the middle of Shir to the shady part so they wouldn't say anything bad about, oh, it's too hot over here. So we see from here that you're not even supposed to talk bad. We know there's an Isser Lashon Hara, but there seems to be a special issue not to talk against Eretz Yisrael either. And that could be part of the Aveir of the Meraglim, besides for lying, but you can't speak bad about Eretz Yisrael either. There's a special din against that. Reb Chia bar Gamda migander ba'afra. Reb Chia bar Gamda rolled in the dust of Eretz Yisrael. Shenemar ki ratzu avodas avara es avoneha ves afara yichonenu. For your servants wanted its stones, and they found favor in its dust. So it's good dust, so he rolled in it. Lahavdil, the Dead Sea, they smear the mud on themselves for the minerals. So they love it. They don't just roll in it. They ship it, and they Amr B'Zera, Amr Yirmiyah bar Abba. Dor Sheben David Ba, the generation when Mashiach will come, Katigor B'Tamid Chachamim. There's going to be big complaints and degradation about Tamid Chachamim. Ki Amrisa Kamei de Shmuel Amar, when they said the statement from Shmuel, he said Siruf Achar Siruf. It's like being put in a crucible, like for silver, to get the impurities out, the dross out, and then after again and again and again. Shnemar, as the pasuk says, Va'odba Asiri Avashava Vaisala Va'er. And when it's going to be 1/10, you're going to put it again, and it will be burned away. Tani Rav Yosef says, Bezuzi ubezuzi de bezuzi. They're going to be, so the tziruf achar tziruf, Rashi says, it means there's going to be xeros on top of xeros on top of xeros. And here, bezuzi, 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 they're going to plunder after plunder after plunder. So that's not such a good thing. Should we? I think we'll wait for the last line or two here. We'll make a date near Hashem to have a siyum and a suda, and we'll finish this hopefully in the next week or so, sometime before Rosh Hashanah for sure. But we'll figure out a day to do that. So Mir Hashem, next we're going to learn Maseches Beitza. Maseches Beitza, just a brief introduction. Certain things. So there's 39 malachos that we can't do on Shabbos. On Yantif, we're allowed to carry because it's a malacha gerua. It is an inferior malacha. You don't change anything by doing that malacha, and you're allowed to cook for human consumption. But you're not allowed to do everything from to harvest the wheat and grind it and then do all that stuff, because then instead of getting ready for Yantif, you're going to be so busy on Yantif doing the thing. So some of the malachos you have to do before Yantif, and some of them you're allowed to do on Yantif. Like you can't grind up the flour, but you're allowed to make a dough and bake it, because fresh bread is better than not fresh bread. So you're allowed to bake fresh on Yantif, obviously if you had the fire from before, but you can't you can't go harvest it and mill it and winnow it and mill it and all that stuff. That's too much stuff to do on Yantif. So Beitza talks about laws of Yantif. It also talks about things of muktzah, things of muktzah for Shabbos, muktzah not for Shabbos, and other things like that. So that's what we'll do next. What?
We're going to talk about.
Yeah. So that's what it's about. I have the Gemara, so I can bring it over today, so you could just in between Mincha Marv or something, because they
you're-
came today.
You're allowed to chef.
Yeah, because in those, so that's the difference between baking and shechting. So in those days they didn't have freezers, you'd be allowed to shecht on Yantif also.
Right, but that's quite involved. And you're talking about, winnowing and stuff.
Difference is that if you have the flour ready to bake, it doesn't matter if you keep the flour a couple days. But for the fresh flesh,
Right.
that there is a difference. So right, so Amir Hashem, we will start that next week, and we should have a siyum where our families can come also. So I don't know, we'll figure that out soon, hopefully.